So I stumbled across this literally only today, and the ending of it just is a chef's kiss. Perfect memery. Just see what you think.
COVID has taken this year, just since the outbreak, has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's the lives. When you think about it. Come on, man.
I can't watch. There's like 100 of these, like the More You Joe memes, and Jake has been like forcing me to watch them on repeat, and it like rots your brain. Like I can't do it. I can't watch any more of these.
It takes
memes.
like 100 years, I guess. What was that?
Oh my god, man! Just listening to him talk melts my brain. It's just, it's not.
It's
pleasant,
true.
and
It's just... so. What was that? I don't even know how to describe what that was. I can't repeat what he said. There's no way I can do that.
The thing that seems really weird and uncanny to me about him is the fact that he has this really strained, forced compassion. Whenever he speaks, he's trying to look like he's very concerned because he's trying to sort of brand himself as the opposite of Trump. And he's talking about these issues, usually social justice issues that deep down he doesn't give a fuck about. But he's like, I care about the TikTok non-binaries so much, and it just means so much to me. This demographic,
If there's anything that man, I care about, it's whether or not the what do they call the trans.
Yeah,
tell you about the transmission inside the Corvette.
So
Transmission. That's what trans means, right?
He's like he's like Boomhauer. It's basically Boomhauer in his 70s.
Except for minus the gibberish that strings it all together. Because it pauses.
It's just minus the gibberish, just incoherence with a few pauses in between. As he starts to try to think about the next amount of incoherent speech he tries to rumble out of his mouth.
It's because his brain is working overtime trying to care about all of this stuff that he just doesn't care about.
Yeah, it's not that he has the capacity in the first place, but he's also diverting some of the energy to the compassion engines. And
and it's like it's making
the dilithium crystals are breaking down.
Yeah, exactly. He's short-circuiting. But that's the thing, is like so much of what's going on between the Democrats and Republicans it's cultural signaling. And that's sort of what I've realized from watching the way that, liberals have sort of been reacting to this election and what's been going on, is that really and truly when it's not really about policy or anything per se. It's about the fact that that's the party that culturally signals towards what they believe are their cultural values. And that's kind of the thing that they're trying to reinstate more so than anything else.
The scheme that they've ultimately pulled, though, is that none of the mechanics of nothing will fundamentally change, to quote Big Joe.
Of course.
But like the war is then exactly between the things that you're talking about. It's about reasserting cultural dominance on this faux compassionate, faux concerned, not like it's bullshit. Obviously it's bullshit. Like we know fucking Joe Biden doesn't give a flying fuck about trans people or like if you asked him about trans people, like what that even is, he would probably say like, I have a Corvette. And
here's the thing, though.
I'm gonna hit you with it.
Probably wouldn't even. He would probably just completely misunderstand it completely and just be like, I went to the male bathroom once in a gas station in Tennessee, and there was a woman in there, and I didn't feel the slightest bit. You know what I'm trying to. Yeah, come on, man.
I think you nailed exactly what he would say. Try to tell a bullshit, because he's done that before. His bullshit, like he saw a gay man story from the 1970s when his dad, or not the 1970s, the 1950s, and his dad was like, he
tells stories. Yeah, he tells
and they're
stories.
Bullshit, because in the 1950s, they'd fucking like kill a gay person if they saw him.
No, it's crazy. It's crazy to me though, because again, cultural signifier and compassion being the biggest part of that. Sort of this sort of socially coerced compassion. And I mean, compassion is something that arises naturally. It's not something you can force out of somebody. And compassion works differently for a lot of people. I know for me, it like when I see something fucked up or I see someone is going through a hard time, I'm usually numb for a little bit until I go and process it. And then I start to feel the compassion arise. For some people, it's instantaneous. For some people, it may take a while. But this sort of culture tries to force compassion out of people and tries to force people to care. And what you get is a bunch of people with smiles, fake fucking uncanny smiles like Joe Biden and fucking Kamala Harris, going around pretending to care about every single fucking issue under the sun. And nobody cares about every issue under the sun. No human being cares about fucking every issue under the sun.
And when they say care, it's a different thing too. Like, when I care about something, it means I direct energy towards it. I think about it, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what they want. They want an expression that can be read by other people. Like, they want it to be signified that you care. That's what caring is in today's society. It's not because, I probably have an affect that's not entirely compatible with how things are. When I express I care about something, oftentimes it comes off angry, and people really don't like that. But it can also be, you spend like a week writing something on it and you put something up and the week later, it doesn't matter anymore. It's not like something that people are visibly able to understand because you didn't like give the right facial expression at the right time. He doesn't mean that. It's like they have to rehearse these performances of caring. And that's, again, how you get Joe Biden, pretending to care about a bunch of shit that's very obvious.
I know what you mean, but like, I'm not particularly online, so I don't really communicate that much that way. But I definitely get what you mean in terms of like not coming across in the way that you want to when you care about something. I feel like a lot of the time when I'm having a conversation with someone about something I'm really into, sometimes I come across either like frustrated or something.
No, I definitely, like that's my experience.
When it's purely just like I want to get the words out quickly, and that is like it's frustration that my mouth just doesn't move fast enough. It's not frustration at the topic or about what we're talking about or of the person I'm talking to. It's just like that I can't speak fast enough or like condense a paragraph into like a syllable to like actually get across how much I want to talk about what we're talking about most of the time.
I totally agree with you on that.
I have to be totally radically honest though, because I'm a socialist in my heart. I'm an Aquarius after all. I can't not care. But in my brain, I'm like a Randian, basically. And like I have very sort of limited avenues for compassion. Like my compassion is mostly generalized in that sense. So I'm like a dark Aquarius. I'm like Palpatine from Star Wars. I'm like a generalized, like in sort of this sort of dictatory kind of way of caring for things. Like I want things to have I want people to have like a general well-being. But when it starts getting into the inertia of everything that happens to everyone, that's where I get lost. And I feel like a lot of people are. It's overwhelming. And then that I feel like a lot of people feel that way. And a lot of people are averse to being asked to care about the inertia. They just like, well, what's the problem? What is being done to fix it type of thing? Or they're like, what's the problem? They want to know like the basic aspects of the problem and what they can do. They don't want to know the ins and outs of every single thing that happens to every single person. Because there's only so much the human brain can, and there's only so much compassion that we can have for everything. Otherwise, it just becomes abstract.
All human emotion, all human action, it is powered by energy, and every person has a finite amount of that. Finite
amount of it, exactly. And I feel like this sort of demand, and the politicians are caving to it, obviously, especially on the Democrat side, because that's the cultural signaling that they do. We're the party of the quote unquote oppressed, not of the working class, but of marginalized identities. They don't care about the whole class thing.
If you can get like people from marginalized identities into the ruling class, that's the goal, right?
Yeah,
that's
it is
perfect representation.
The goal their goal is to basically have the violence of the system not be expressed anymore along racialized or gendered lines, but solely upon class. So a lot of these people...
So to be class aware is a sin.
Yeah, basically. So a lot of these people will basically be like, I don't mind that our jails are full so long as it's an equal number of as long as there's equal racially demographics that are in there. I don't care if police are violent, so long as they're shooting white people too. I don't care if people are drinking lead in their water, so long as it's not just black people that are doing it. That's kind of the attitude that a lot of these people have.
I'm kind of thirsty. Could somebody bring me a cup of water? Anybody bring me a cup of water?
What you were saying about how like we can only care about so much.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like that's definitely a thing. Like we can only there's a special number or a special name for the actual like, you know, sociology theory or whatever you would call this, where you like the amount of people you can actually give a shit about basically in your life. And it's about 200 people. 200 people you can like know intimately and have this sort of like intimate relationship with. Basically anything after that basically becomes just like a statistic or whatever. Like it's kind of it's along the similar lines of something like, I can't remember if it was Stalin or fucking Hitler said this, like 1 death is a tragedy, 1 million death is a statistic. Like it's so much that becomes so far removed from you, whereas the intimacy and like the visceralness of that one person like being there would be like way more traumatic than you hear.
It's like between 15 and 20 for me, to be completely honest.
But I feel like it's the same with just things in life, and like and politics is just one area of your life. So it's also like,
oh, absolutely.
You know, you're gonna there's only so much you're gonna be able to dedicate to a certain amount of stuff, and like and depending on what you do for a job or how you grew up or your interests, anything, you just might be more interested in seeing, you know, political advances in whatever. You might like start a teachers union because you're a teacher. Like, do you know what I mean? It might not be that I don't know what kind of.
No, but we're supposed to be basically jack of all trades, master of none. That's the plan, is that we all sort of fatigue ourselves attempting to just care and be so knowledgeable and be so sort of invested in these very atomized issues, and ignore the things that unite us and ignore the things that would give us all like a basic quality of life and good standard of living.
Well, it's also that like individualistic way of thinking that's still ingrained from like the sort of Thatcherite sort of
the neoliberal atomization type
of
stuff.
like everybody needs to be able to do everything themselves or be into everything or know or be, you know, care. They are a responsible citizen, whatever. Like
there's no such thing as society. You are taking care of yourself.
Exactly. But then if you were to say like everyone to their own strengths, like, you know, this person is good at doing rustling like the teachers union stuff up. This person's like good at doing whatever. It's everyone playing to their strengths and not like everyone trying to do everything in a shit way, but everyone actually doing the shit that they actually give a shit about.
That's kind of the reason why conversations about intersectionality frustrate me so much, because it's always like, well, this intersects with that, and you can't talk about that because that intersects with this, and this intersects with that, and if you don't notice that intersection, then that means you're oppressing that, and it's just like, oh my god, this is math. This is algebra.
With a lot of the intersectional conversation, they're talking about it in an additive fashion, just like that, and all that ends up doing, because it's not additive. Like that, if you actually read intersectional theory, like that is a perversion of it, and it's also the primary perversion of it that they're constantly on. They're talking about it from it is the oppression Olympics. That is what they are doing. It is the oppression Olympics.
And it's very frustrating because I feel like a lot of this ethos is basically what the democratic establishment has observed in terms of the patterns of social justice discourse. And that's what it's sort of attempting to rebrand itself at and embody, because Obama's and Obama-Biden 2008 time, they didn't give a fuck about any of that stuff, because 2008 everyone was still somewhat problematic, quote unquote. The social justice discourse was still somewhat esoteric then, and of course there were notions of racial justice and things like that, but there wasn't this huge sort of massive all-pervasive discourse as there is now. And I feel like they sort of observed what arose in that era and like in the Trump era, and they're sort of rebranding in order to reconstruct themselves as the cultural signifier of what embodies these values that are mostly sort of espoused by, you know, people who have been through that academia pipeline, a specific class of people who went to college and who have been socialized in a certain way. And yeah, it's very strange to watch that turn into this very sort of ugly Malthusian contempt for the poor, this sort of let them eat cake attitude that's being justified through. So like I was on Twitter, and someone who I actually know IRL, which was quite funny, tweeted about how, the white working class, it was like they were talking about the white working class, and they were saying how the white working class basically, like, it was more or less like they deserve their poverty. That was kind of the sentiment that was being pushed. And there's been a lot of this discourse floating around about how, Trump supporters or quote unquote white working class people need to do better if they want to be taken seriously. And the idea that we don't have to care about their material conditions because they're morally abhorrent and they deserve whatever's coming to them, which is monstrous. And no socialist
moral means
should...
testing.
Yeah,
like if
it's
you have
moral
the right
means
opinions,
testing. Yeah.
if you have the right opinions, then it's okay to advocate on your behalf. If you don't, well, I guess you're a fascist. You're evil, and you should fuck off and die.
Imagine if a state, if you went to get benefits, say you or unemployment as you would call it, and they then drugged into your psychology to see whether you were woke enough to deserve to be able to fucking feed your children.
So hey,
like how monstrous?
Do you believe in flat Earth or not? Like, if you do believe in flat Earth, you can't have benefits / unemployment. If you don't believe, and like
this is
that's
what they
bullshit.
Want.
It is.
That's what they want, though.
I'm
and it's
obviously using a
monstrous.
sillier issue than any of the issues we're talking about. But like it's nonetheless still like you have the freedom to believe in a flat Earth. It's dumb, but like that doesn't mean you should die.
It's absolutely monstrous. Like, and the fact that they don't see that it's monstrous is terrifying to me.
And if you read Alan Moore at all, and you've read Jerusalem, is sort of magnum opus. I definitely recommend everyone go through all 3 tomes of it. But there are like really crazily old historical decisions that were made against some areas of like countries and stuff that have vastly shaped the class of those people in the modern age. And like those decisions were made arbitrarily hundreds of years ago by some fucking king that had a petty fucking quarrel with whatever fucking lord that was running Northampton at the time. So instead of setting up the like largest university at the time, which then basically went on to become Cambridge University, instead of doing it in Northampton, he went to do it in Cambridge. And that obviously affected also like the whole stature of the Midlands and like all sorts of shit. So like there's like so many like vastly complex and nuanced reasons as to why people are working class, and to say you deserve it just because you're white or just because you live somewhere is kind of is pretty disgusting.
So on that note, welcome to Low Society. Thank you so much for listening today. Be sure to leave 5 stars if you're listening to us on iTunes. Be sure to also visit our Patreon. If you have the extra $1, you get access to bonus episodes. Also, check us out on Reddit. Check out our Twitter. Check out our YouTube. We do live streams there sometimes. We're trying to make that a more regular fixture. We just did one actually yesterday. So go check that out if you missed it.
Also go to lowsociety.net. We've got some stuff brewing there. We've always got big ambitions, et cetera, et cetera. The compound is in progress.
In massive progress. And I mean, speaking of progress, that's kind of the brand of the Democratic Party, but in this really sort of hollow way that's like incredibly meaningless. The idea of it being this sort of historical continuum of social justice when they're the very thing that's inhibiting it in the first place. I also find it monstrous that this whole let them eat cake attitude is emerging as well. Like even the whole brunch meme, the whole point of the brunch meme when it came out in 2016, it was sort of making fun of the out of touchness of, these sort of white liberals and the way they sort of view politics. But now people are literally like, they're doubling down and it's sort of unironic almost. It's just like a mask off.
The whole like, it's the meme of the leftist, and when I'm saying leftist in scare quotes, it's a meme. It's the meme of the leftist embodying the stereotype that the right wing is trying to scare the normal person with. They're like, yeah, that's us. Like they're Chad Yesing the wrong thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing is it seems as if like what all politics are evolving into is this sort of cruel battle, this really cruel, it seems as if the domain of politics is basically, especially in the media, is basically reserved for the worst kinds of people who are willing to sort of turn it into this cruel sport of everything you do defining yourself in terms of what's going to own the other side or what's going to make the other side sad, because politics is no longer about like material, you know, things or the division of goods or the division of labor or any of those things. Politics is now, I hate those people over there and I want them to suffer, and I have my cultural signifiers and they have
and
their
it's obvious why people are like, I hate politics, because that's what they see as politics. Like they're not like, and then somebody goes, well, everything is politics. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Not when you
It
look
really
on,
isn't.
not when you turn on the TV and it's just two people saying that the other person is evil.
Yeah. And two people who are fundamentally the same.
Fucking insane.
Which is the thing. Materially, they're fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
Materially, they fundamentally protect the same interests. However, they have different cultural signifiers and they appeal to different people with different cultural signifiers. And it's just this endless sort of like kayfabe. It's kabuki theater, and people are sort of getting lost in the spectacle of the performance that's being put on in front of them and turning into the worst versions of themselves as well. Like, one of the things that a lot of people were sort of surprised about was how some of their favorite media figures basically were yelling, "Let them eat cake," in more or less sort of covert or sometimes even overt ways during the whole kind of announcement of what was going on with Biden and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, when people show you who you are, fucking believe them. I'm quoting Maya Angelou, so I'm turning into my mom. But yeah, when people show you who they are, believe them, which is what I keep telling people who are acting brand new and surprised about like what they're seeing in that regard. It's theater, and it's all about, you know, libidinal kind of entertainment. And I feel like a lot of what they were wanting on the liberal side was for the conservatives to feel exactly how they felt in 2016. They wanted to see people throwing themselves around. But I don't think I haven't seen any of that. And I don't think that
I saw
they do.
Some conservatives, I have seen some doing the whole Malding thing. But it's not like in 2016 where like the Hillary people were literally like, well, I actually shouldn't say that. Like, to some extent, there are a lot of those people who are attempting to say, like, Trump is going to do this arcane process that will end up with him in the Oval Office. But I would say that even that, like, the Hillary version of that in 2016 was a lot more insane. There were a lot more people on that train. There were, like, I mean, the Hillary version of they're going to go to the Supreme Court, the House is going to overturn this decision, blah, 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 blah. It was so fervent and so fucking insane. And like, if you said anything about it, like normal, well, I shouldn't say normal, but liberal people who should have been concerned about credibility in some way, people who are on like MSNBC, people who are on like supposedly respectable outlets, and I'm using the term loosely here, we're acting as though like stuff that's posted on like these random like dumb shit blogs run by a guy who knows exactly how to pander right was like the gospel truth, and that there was some path for Hillary Clinton to take office in January. And it was like, no, that is not true. That is fucking insane.
And it's just a fake narrative that you've got on both sides for both elections. On like the liberal side with Hillary losing, you've then got 4 years of it was Russia have come and subverted our democracy. And now with Trump winning, with Trump losing and with Biden winning, you've now got like the deep state of like the Democrat have like organized and gone against Trump, and they've like done all of this electoral fraud to get rid of him. They've stolen the election.
I think one is more plausible than the other. Is all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm actually. I would like to take that on a little bit. I think that whether one is more plausible than the other is actually irrelevant. Like, is it possible? Probably more possible the deep state thing, to be completely honest. But I'm going to go ahead and say that it is better for anybody who has an anti-establishment message for a large swath of the population to think the deep state is subverting democracy, because that's technically the truth.
Yes,
Whether or
it
not
is.
it's the truth in the way they think it's the truth, it doesn't take a lot to get them over to the like you could talk about gerrymandering, you could talk about the electoral college, you could talk about all the ways that everything is subverted, and it's legal and it's normal and it's right there in your face. And we've been trying to say this shit for how many years now, and you're just now getting it. Why is that?
I mean, Peter, that just is such a spherical globe perspective. I don't know if I could really accept any of that as truth.
Still don't think that it's the same amount of ire as was what was expressed in 2016 by the losing side. That's just my opinion, though. I think that that's what they wanted. But I think because on the other side in 2016, on Trump's side, they saw what they were doing as like a legitimate victory. And they all really believed in what they were voting for. Whereas this time round, these people don't see it as a legitimate victory. And the majority of them don't actually believe in what they voted for or feel any sort of tether to it. It was more just, this is my opportunity to take back the cultural signaling that my country is sending, not only to itself, but to the rest of the world as well.
I mean, I don't know. I've seen memes that kind of equal on both an equal sort of hilarity on both sides of the losing spectrum there, with like in 2016 of that person like completely breaking down and just like screaming into the air that became a GIF reaction.
That woman in the neon green coat.
Yeah, exactly. And
I know who you're talking about.
And then on the same time, like the people that are wearing like crazy masks and like doing like what would you call it? That movie.
Purge.
Yeah, like Purge Night almost looking scenery with like Trump supporters saying stolen election banners and like all of this stuff, which is just as cringy to me, at least anyway. I don't. I'm not in either camp, so I don't. I would assume that it looks kind of cringy to a lot of people, but yeah,
I think anybody who's not in one of those camps thinks it looks cringy regardless.
But I think it's better if you're doing cringe for the shit that you believe in. If you're going to post cringe, then you better post cringe for something
genuine
that you believe
cringe.
In. Yeah, genuine cringe is like, there's a charm to it. There's a bit of a fucking, but then if you're posting cringe and you don't even like, you're not even emotionally invested in what you're doing, it just has this like grossness to it. It's like, it's like dirty. It feels dirty.
I definitely felt like the sentiment in the Cheeto champ meme from this election cycle. I definitely felt the belief that she really meant what it was good.
Yeah, some of like the Cheeto champ person, some of them are like genuine, but most people like no.
Those people wanted Trump gone, which is not like a demand that is material for them. Like it has nothing to do with where they're coming from. It has nothing to do with their job. It has nothing to do with their everyday life, and everything to do, again, with the cultural signifiers. The cultural signifiers that Trump puts out offends them. Therefore, they want to get the fascist out of the White House, champ.
No, it's interesting because a lot of the demands, if you even look back on it in the 2016 one, there were still actual material demands from the right of like, we need to sort out immigration. We actually have these policies that we want to be seen to, or at least look like you're fucking seeing to them, and not just pretend that there's not a problem, and not pretend that you're not hearing that we think that there's a problem.
Whereas like a really specific one is that Hillary Clinton was, at least for a while, pro Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was the trade deal, which very specifically affects the jobs of people in the manufacturing industry, which is, by the way, a hollowed out industry as it is. The idea that there would be a further trade deal which could hinder them was a very material concern. And guess who was the one who didn't support it? Donald Trump. And he actually did not participate in the TPP. Like, there's a very real chance that Biden will put the United States into the TPP.
One of the really interesting things in the election that I found really funny was the racial blaming. Because Americans don't really view class along sort of this broad line. They view it as they experience it through like identity, I guess. So when
even when they talk about class, it's an identity. Like it's a signifier, it's an aesthetic, it's like a feeling, it's a self-ID thing.
But like
when self-ID is working class.
It's interesting though, because the fucking the racial sort of demographic data came out, and then all of a sudden there was a bunch of racial blaming of like Hispanic men for like voting for Trump, and they were like,
I
"Oh,
know.
it's all the machismo, Hispanic men, and they're like fucking machismo or whatever." And I'm like, it's so funny
That
how
is
these
racism.
quote unquote, these quote unquote anti-racist libs automatically start essentializing and demonizing people like they're fucking phrenologists from the fucking 18th century. As soon as like it goes against like
Well,
their
if there's one
political
thing I
order.
know about the Hispanic male, it is that they have too
Yes,
much
yes.
machismo.
Yeah, literally, literally.
Did you look at the way that
have
they
a
voted? Yes, indeed. The machismo is apparent right here.
Yeah, literally.
Too much machismo and apparently a penchant for jalapeno peppers.
And then like
yes,
liberal.
yes. The taste buds are much less sensitive, and therefore, when they get to the restaurant, they tend to order much spicier food. And also, they do this to prove their machismo among the other Hispanic meals.
Oh God! Even I think it was J-Lo or someone did it, and she like came out.
It was
and
Eva
she was like,
Longoria.
"Oh, Eva Longoria, yeah."
She did something where
came out.
didn't she say that Latino women were the real heroes of the story and not black
Yeah.
women? Or
Yeah.
some shit like that,
Some
which is
dumb shit.
absolutely fucking
But then
insane.
again, I'm not even on the side of like liberal black women because the shit that
No,
they've been
I'm not
doing-
either. Like neither
The
of
shit
them
that
are
they do
the
on Twitter.
heroes. It's a fucking voting.
No, because the shit that they do on Twitter like pisses me off, and like most of them hate me and like whatever. But these liberal black women were coming out like, "We're the saviors of this election, Joe Biden. Don't make us have to come out for you again," as if they have any fucking power. Like they're so. The thing is, the cultural hegemony has sort of done this faux elevation of black women, but really and truly, it's like the house Negro kind of thing, where it's like we'll make you the sort of gatekeepers of and the sort of housemaids of this neoliberal agenda. We'll give you a comfortable position, and then they have that position, and then they think that gives them some kind of power to yell at the fucking actual hegemony that's above them. And they were all like there's a lot of like these like black media pundits and like celebrities and stuff were all like, yeah, the black women in America were the real saviors of the Democrats, and don't make us do it again, Joe Biden. And it's like, it's not, you're scolding the fucking president of the potential president of the United States. Like, what the fuck what leverage do you have?
Further,
Black
what
women are
demands
already
do you
such
even have? Like-
I'm seeing all of them roll back on their fucking defund the police shit because they know it's hypocritical to be like, all cops are bastard, defund the police, and then they've just put like a fucking prosecutor in the fucking vice presidency. All of they've created this like fucking Chinese finger trap of like mediocrity that they're just like they're like it's ridiculous. They've tied themselves in, like Me Too has gone out the window.
Yeah, they
Black
had to
Lives
dump
Matter.
that because of Joe
No,
Biden.
yeah, because of Joe Biden. It's just all gone.
Black
And
Lives Matter also, the organization, the one that's funded by Novo, the nonprofit, what I wouldn't call the people who are actually concerned with police violence, but rather an organization that takes NPO money. They put this letter out that was like Joe Biden has to listen to our agenda, and if he doesn't, we're going to have to organize against him. And it's like, all right, why is there nothing in this letter about what that agenda is? Why?
Yeah.
Why is there
Yeah.
no specifics being put out there at all as to what the demands actually are? Why is it that this whole thing is literally just to defang itself? Is it literally just so that you can appear as though you are opposition while defanging yourself, like not
Yeah.
making demands?
But that's
Yes,
what so
I
much of
believe
it is. Yeah, it's controlled opposition.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, controlled opposition. It's this sort of we will admonish you while also manufacturing consent for you on the side. It's very frustrating because they've managed to use identity as this sort of moral cover for their privilege. And that's sort of the new kind of mode of operation of like this sort of this ruling class of the sort of left wing of capital. They are basically using it as a tool to manufacture consent for themselves, and it's like really obvious, and most people who see that hate it. And it's also dangerous for the people who are actually affected by these identity issues, because it creates a situation where those actual interests are obfuscated, or they're just not paid attention to unless they can be leveraged in a way that sort of creates power or social capital.
And also it creates the reaction. Like
Yeah, it
the
creates the
political
reaction, yeah.
reaction, like that's the whole thing that what Gamergate was was it was people who were pissed off about like neoliberal feminism. Like they saw neoliberal feminism and they were like, well, that's just like trying to destroy my thing.
Yeah.
Like seeing this sort of election, and I guess because it was right off the back of one of our elections, which sort of hasn't happened, I guess, in my lifetime. We had sort of the one in the end of last year with this American one following this year. But just the difference in how politicians are held accountable in the press is so vastly different in the UK and America. Just how light on policy and everything that they need to be in one of those press interviews is actually kind of remarkable to me. Like in Britain, if you saw well, it would be Diane Abbott, I guess, would be the equivalent that would be running with Jeremy Corbyn, or I guess that would still be, you'd actually have an opposition. So it would be some, I don't know, some fucking, you know, other kind of politician. I don't know who would it be in Starmer's sort of like cabinet. I don't know, but that you'd have the UK equivalent basically come up and say that. And if they came up and said, "Hey, I'm just a black woman that listens to hip hop. What do you want to know?" On the BBC to like Andrew Marr or whatever. Oh my God, to Jeremy Paxman? He would eat you alive. Like you would that would be the end of your political career. But then just to see how she could just get up there and do that with a massive fake smile on her face with this such disgusting like disingenuous laugh that makes me cringe every fucking time I hear it. And then I don't know if people are actually eating it up, if people are actually like, this is brilliant, this is who, like,
they do, because it's cultural signaling, and that's all they care about is cultural signaling, which is the reason why Kamala Harris can get up and be like, why Hillary Clinton could be like, I have hot sauce in my bag, swag. Why Kamala Harris can be like, I like to listen to hip hop. I'm just a black woman who likes to listen to hip hop. Meanwhile, she's fucking gonna throw your children
How do you do,
in
fellow
jail.
kids?
Yeah, literally. It's fucking freaky. But then there's another thing that I noticed is that Americans really fucking hate each other based along these aesthetic and cultural lines. And sometimes there's class stuff within that. But really and truly, it's largely aesthetic and cultural, because to outside European perspective, or I guess me in that sense, I'm also African perspective, there's a term we have in Nigeria called bush people. And bush people basically means like uncultured, uncouth, you know, from the village type of people. And to everyone else, Americans are all bush people. Like all of you are bush people. And I think on a deep level, you know that you're bush cowboys in the saloon, spitting your tobacco in buckets. And like, you don't want to be that. There's like a shame associated with that. So you have this group of people who want to go to college and then go to the cities and become more metropolitan and, you know, try to become more cultural and refined, and who travel, and they hate and they look at contempt with, you know, because America, it's like the frontier, the whole like frontiersman thing, the ones who rejected this sort of European kind of like culture and the whole monarchism and all of those things, and the quote unquote land of it's founded in a way where class is a lot more abstracted, because there wasn't this sort of monarchy kind of like inbred ruling elite. It was a different kind of ruling elite in that regard. So class is a lot more abstract. But then you have these different cultures that kind of grow out and sort of split off from each other. And those, if this is actually even making any sense, and those two factions like fucking hate each other. They absolutely hate each other, and they want nothing to. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the liberal cosmopolitan people are also more concerned about how America is perceived internationally in a way the people who are like not college educated, rural kind of people are not. They don't care about how America is perceived internationally. They're America first. We don't give a fuck if everyone thinks that we're asshole backward hicks. But then these people really, really, like, I saw people on Twitter crying because Joe Biden was talking with world leaders, and they were like, oh, the first time that I'm not embarrassed about our president talking to a world leader. Like, it's like this weird narcissism where they feel like the country is a reflection of them in this really weird way, in this deep way that most people don't really feel. And they want the international image of the country to reflect their values. It's really strange, even if they're doing all the imperialism.
Also, they tend to like Doctor Who a lot.
But I don't know why Americans feel so much shame about being Americans. Like, you guys have such a huge cultural hegemony, but there's still this like weird hatred for yourselves in this sense, like this weird self-loathing, and that self-loathing then gets turned in on class lines. And like, even the idea that, oh, look at these poor, uneducated, working class whites, they're so stupid. Well, then how do you get smart? You get smart by having access to information. But in order to have access to information, you have to go to college. And in order to go to college, you have to have money. So you're just hating people for being gatekept away from the things that would make them more, quote unquote, cosmopolitan and refined in that regard.
You say make education free, and they say no, because then it gets rid of the, the quality of education. So I mean,
it's not just that it gets rid of the quality of education; it also gets rid of that separating line. They don't get to look down on somebody.
If everyone's got one, and it's kind of what's happened now, regardless. Now, because because you don't have to afford it, you don't have to have the cash up front. Now you just get the debt. So if you're just happy to get the debt, then you can just still do that and still get your thing, which is just
which you end up in. That ends up being a perpetual cycle.
And so now, which is the whole thing now, which is like people focusing more on their masters because less people have their masters, which is how you'd separate yourself in this sort of economy. Which was your masters was literally like a pretty like unique. There was so few people doing that for years, and now it's like the numbers are going up and up and up and up. And I guess people are saying like, oh, that's good. There's more people, more specialists, more this and that. But it's like, it's disingenuous because it's actually watered down. Like all of the, fucking bachelors that people have for their fucking $9,000 a year. What does that mean if fucking everyone's got a fucking bachelor's?
Fuck all. And then it's even worse if you're not college educated. It's even worse in terms of like being perceived. And I mean, I noticed this in America because college is a bigger rite of passage there than it is here, because there are still certain pipelines for people in the UK if you didn't go to university. That's sort of starting to disappear, but most people I know here's parents didn't go to fucking university. Jake's parents,
mine didn't.
Yeah, Jake's parents didn't go to university. Like a lot of people who I know here also didn't go to university. They went straight into the working world as soon as they graduated high school. But in America, there's this sort of like, your life is basically it's basically your life is basically determined. And your economic standing, who you marry, the class that you marry into, how you're perceived, the types of jobs you have access to, all of that is sort of organized through the university system and in this really like massive way. And yeah, that's what ends up kind of creating this weird stratification. And it's so hard to talk about because class is obscured. And a lot of the resentment that a lot of people feel towards each other is class-based, but it's always sort of talked about along cultural lines and aesthetic lines rather than like material ones, which is how you get a bunch of rich, college educated liberals talking down to like poor working class people about how they're privileged and racist and don't deserve to have food to feed their kids.
It's definitely a British thing as well, though, with like the guilt of the British Empire and like all of that. It's definitely not just an American thing. I feel like any major, and it'll be a thing in Germany with their guilty past. It'll be a thing in like any colonial nation. I feel like is going to have that kind of like guilt because they know when it comes down to it, all of it is built on this. It's like built on that history, which is undeniable. So
and then all of that, all of the college, all of that stuff. Everything that, becomes accessible to the working class and becomes expected of the working class, it's all built on the backs of, all of these investment industries that are more or less destroying the global south.
It's interesting, though, because I've lived in both America and the UK, and I feel like there's a lot more shame attached to being poor in America than there is here because we've always had
the land of opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And we've always had such a brutal class society that if you're born into a certain class, there's no hope for upward mobility. No, it's like we have a know your station kind of culture. So there's a sort of culture around poverty and an aesthetic around poverty and a way that poor people cope with poverty here and create culture and all of those things. Whereas in America, it's like, because class is so abstracted, because there's no queen and, you know, it's the land of opportunity and there are all these success stories about starting from the bottom type of thing.
Now I'm here.
It becomes a lot more obscured. And then
bottom, now I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. Then I feel like there's a lot more shame attached to it. And I feel like a lot of people are afraid to talk about being poor. And they're just quiet about it, and they let people talk down to them. They let people shame them. They let people make them feel guilty. They let people make them feel dirty and ugly. They let people make them feel like they deserve where they're at, covertly or even without them even knowing. And I feel like there needs to be a lot more pushback against that, because the way that I've been hearing people talking about poverty reminds me of how people used to talk about race, like back in the day. Like, I don't see class, or like, you shouldn't be so angry when you talk about class, or, you know, it's not my fault
Class
that you're
blind politics is it's classist. Let's just say.
Basically.
I don't know, man. A lot of shit's got to change. So I think it's inevitable that you're going to have to talk about some of that stuff. When it comes to property and, you know, how shit's kind of distributed, how we, you know, generate power, all these sorts of things.
No, that homeless man is just like a temporarily embarrassed startup guy. He's gonna start his little tech startup, and he's soon gonna be living it big with the rest of us.
He's got a killer app.
He's got an app
that's just not realized yet.
It's not realized yet. He's got it in him, and he's just, you know, he's biding his time. He's doing the struggle. He's doing the grind, and, you know, it's valorized in American life, that the sort of the struggle and the grind, like being
rise and grind.
I feel like that's the way that American working class and poor sort of try to have their own culture of taking pride. Is by saying, you know, it's the like valorizing struggling, valorizing
the struggle is real.
Yeah, or valorizing, like, you know, being so stretched thin that you have no time for anything else.
Well, it's like those things that they try to make it look inspirational from America, but it's actually like heart-crushingly depressing.
Yeah.
When there's like, look, Billy the fifth graders, all of his classmates teamed up and did a bake sale for 6 months straight, and now he's got his brain tumor removed, so he can like survive and live a normal childhood. And you're like, should Billy's classmates having to be baking fucking lemon bars for 6 months?
Is it really their fucking responsibility to help this kid with his brain tumor? Like, in the United States, yes, it is.
Like, shit like that to me is what tickles me, when they spin it on the head. Like, oh, look at how inspirational this is. Look, they all came together and it's this beautiful thing. And you're like, that's disturbing as fuck.
Or even the stories of like people who have come to like some modicum of basic success, like or even just like a moment of fame, 5 minutes of fame. Like, I remember there was that homeless guy who did the meme. There was that meme. He was like a black homeless guy. He was the one that had the voice, like the radio voice, homeless black guy. And I remember people looked into his past, and, you know, they started to kind of create struggle / poverty porn out of his past. Be like, oh, he lived such a hard life, and then in those like 5 minutes he became a star, kind of thing. And that's like sort of the way that they used to deal with the contradictions in American society, by kind of creating these like false Cinderella stories, these kind of apotheosis narratives, in order to justify the lack of infrastructure and societal concern for the plight of people with less. And the people with more would rather fucking adorn themselves in even more esoteric cultural signifiers, and continuously block out and obfuscate the clear contradictions that are on the ground. But that can only last for so long. And I think that the fact that they're constantly looking for even more esoteric cultural signifiers is just going to make them even more alien and even more removed from the average person. And I feel like that's already happening.
Well, you could even link that back to the additive intersectionality thing, like the idea that we're just like, all right, well, this person is black and a woman and part Asian and part, etc. Like, just name a bunch of things. And they're like, well, you have all of these different things.
That gives you 27 liberal points. That gives you an S tier.
And no one wants to hear that shit. No one. And especially somebody who like actually has problems and knows exactly how you could fix them. They don't want to hear like this fucking identity category fucking bingo. They want to hear like what materially can be done to change their situation, which, I mean, that's like, if you even want to do it along identity lines, like you could talk about it from a material perspective, and that makes a big difference in what you're actually talking about.
But I mean, saying that, I am very interested to see what actions do get taken by the next president for, COVID, everything that's happening right now, because like material problems do fucking exist. I think I heard on Richard Wolff's latest economic update something close to 3 million Americans are going to be evicted come like December 31st or something like that, which is the most amount of like evictions since like the Great Depression or some crazy shit like that, which is nearly 100 years ago.
We had a bunch of people message about how last episode we talked about his COVID plan. They actually poured through it and found nothing of substance beyond, the marketing shit we were talking about. Like quote unquote, they expanded the plan for the transition website, which is buildbackbetter.com if you're interested. And they expanded it with more marketing rhetoric. There's no specifics in it still.
Well, I mean, I would be fucking scared, man. But who knows what they're gonna do? But there's something that has to be done. That's what I'm saying. It gets to a point where, I mean, Trump had to send at least that one check.
But
do you know what I mean?
I feel like he's going to make the excuse of the fact that the Senate is largely Republican. And that's going to be the thing. He's going to basically be like, oh, the Republicans are blocking me from being able to do this and that and blah, blah, blah. We'll just have to wait and see. But like Jake said, these material contradictions, they're not going to go away. They're only going to increase. But that doesn't necessarily make me even optimistic, though, because the way that America has always dealt with that has been through these cultural divides. And I feel like those cultural divides have just become stronger. It's as if as more intense as the economic issues get, the more the cultural divides sort of like intensify themselves as well. And it doesn't seem to, and in certain ways it is kind of sort of trying to undo, but it's hard to tell, because even the fact that more black people voted for Trump, more minorities voted for Trump than have since 1960, blah, blah, blah. I think that there are some areas of stratification, but there are some areas where people are just sort of doubling down, and it's hard to know which way the pendulum's going to swing.
Of course, I hope I didn't mean to come across that I was optimistic about what Biden was going to do. Only that I'm purely interested in what his outcome is going to be, purely because, as you've just pointed out, there is no plan. There is literally nothing that anyone can point to.
They've individualized the responsibility down to the cultural signifier of having a mask on. That's the plan. It is literally just like, hey,
what do you want to know?
Person. Yeah, you're a bad person if you don't have a mask on. We're going to get through this if everyone wears a mask, which is not even fucking true. Like, the reason you wear a mask is to not spread it. It doesn't stop you from getting it.
That is kind of one point that I would say in recent things that I guess I know what he's on about, and does seem to be more of a problem in America, I would say, than I've seen in the UK, with the whole mask thing.
That's just because you're a pedant.
No. Just around like how it's been politicized in the way that like if you don't wear a mask, you're a fucking Republican, or if you got COVID, you're a fucking Republican.
Yes, like, exactly. It's been politicized along those lines. Yes,
people could be careful, wear masks, do all the right things,
and you can still get it.
And you can still get it, and then everyone will still turn around and say, "Oh, well, you're a Republican, or you're a fascist."
You should have just tried harder not to get it.
Whoa, yeah. So him saying like we all just wearing them. I think what he said actually, or the headline was, "Wearing a mask is not a political statement," and like, that's actually a bit of politicking you're doing there, which is like you should be undoing some of that fucking damage, because that does seem to be pretty uniquely American like that. I don't know.
Wearing a mask is not a political statement, is a combative political statement against the people who believe that wearing a mask is enforced on them. And you're literally saying, no, you should be forced. And the thing is, like, I get it. I understand like the perspective of like, yes, people. I understand the perspective of more people wearing masks. I get that. It would help. But like the thing is it's been done in a way where the government is not handing out masks. The government is not really doing anything to help. Like it is still like placing the responsibility on the individual citizen, which is bullshit. Like that is not how a pandemic should be handled.
In the UK, we had a whole stint of Boris Johnson literally praising the private sector, saying, you know, it's not the government that has supplied you all of these masks and made all of these medical supplies. It's the private sector. So we should be praising them for all of the glorious recovery that we're doing from coronavirus due to the private sector.
It's because people think he turned into a pussy after he got coronavirus or whatever. And he was like, no. I am still a Tory at heart. And it doesn't matter that NHS nurses saved my life. I still think that the private sector is the backbone of this nation.
He must have done. He must have got treated on NHS. You couldn't not, as the Prime Minister, get treated on NHS.
He did.
Fuck me. I wouldn't be fucking surprised, though, would you? It's Boris fucking Johnson of anyone.
Here's the thing with him. I feel like, you know how he said there actually is a society? I feel very much like that was like a moment of weakness that he had while in the hospital.
And they did cancel culture on him, but like the conservative version.
Yeah,
which is probably why he did the whole like mask thing, is because they were like, how could you say that, chief? That ain't it. Bad take.
Yeah, that ain't it. This isn't a society. Chief.
This is a fucking like he's just trying to do, but it's obviously he's fucking knackered and he just wants to like quit. Which is the reason why I feel like I don't even want to think about British politics. I like to forget that I'm British a lot of the time because I watch a lot of American television and a lot of my friends are American. So I just like to sort of forget that I'm English and like not think about it most of the time. But if there's another general election, that's going to be a whole other can of worms. And I've had enough elections for like 50 lifetimes, all of which have had horrible results. I can't be bothered anymore.
So the next UK election is actually supposed to line up the same year as the next US election.
Oh God.
2024.
Can't wait for that.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know.
Double the trouble.
Maybe that will be the climax of
that's when everybody just
Western
finally
democracy.
breaks. Every single person has a psychotic break. Like the entirety of the Western world just has a collective psychotic break.
I can't wait for the eldritch horror of 2024 to be unleashed upon us all. And on that note, thank you guys for listening to Low Society. Help us out with our class position, you peasants. Give us money on Patreon. Give us money on Patreon.
Look, we need to eat cake so we can tell you that you can eat cake. Like,
exactly.
It has to go into our mouths for it to be okay to go in your mouths.
Yeah, we need champagne money. And we also need to, get to the point where we can berate you for being angry about your class position on social media. So if
you're poor and you've got a Confederate flag, like we're not really at the point where we can say anything about just the flag, but we're getting there and we need your help.
We need your help. So give us money. And also be sure to leave 5 stars if you're listening on iTunes. Check us out everywhere. We're basically everywhere. And we shall catch you later. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.